I have a comment that I should review this movie, so here we go. Overall, right off the bat, I'm not impressed, but I'm thankfully not too disappointed by comparison to other Hollywood movies. This is probably the best recent Hollywood machine narrative, just beating out her in my opinion, though I realize that's not saying much. Hollywood has still yet to even match Blade Runner, and this movie at best wants to be a lower brow version of Blade Runner by the end. The premise is pretty simple. The head of some fake Google company invites some guy to come do a Turing test on his AI he made, and also he gave it a body. Of course, that's just what it starts as. Transcendence tries to hide behind a last minute fake out and pretend it's really pro machine when it's not. This movie doesn't make that mistake, though it doesn't seem to have a definitive stance, it at least is not anti machine. When it comes to the writer and director of the film, Alex Garland, for the most part, he gets it. As he's said in interviews, he gets that AIs will happen, they will be better than us, we'll just have to get used to it, and that they represent a potential hazard. This is his first time directing, but he is an experienced writer, which is far more important to me anyway, and thankfully he agrees with me on that. The only things of his I've seen are 28 Days Later, a very good film, and I actually played a little bit of Enslaved Odyssey to the West. I liked what I saw, but I didn't play enough to form a solid opinion. He's one of the co-writers on it, and it's widely considered a sleeper hit. Among his inspirations for this movie, he lists 2001: A Space Odyssey and Ray Kurzweil, so almost nothing but good things to say about the writer. We'll probably be seeing more of his work as a director now, too, considering this movie, for all intents and purposes, was a great success. Pretty much all the critical reception to it is positive, and on a $15 million budget, otherwise known as a small art film these days, he's made $36 million, so it at least made some profit. The movie is put together well on just about every level. Well shot, well acted, well directed, though I think the directing is a little minimalist. Some scenes and shots drag on too long that could have been shorter. It takes place mostly at a single location and is largely nothing but dialogue scenes between the three main characters. The budget went almost entirely to the special effects for the machine character Ava to composite onto her the machine parts we see. In other words, from the production standpoint, it makes sense that the movie is largely banking on the script, and that seems to have paid off. I don't know anything about the actors, so I have nothing to say about them. Now I'm going to spoil and react to the entire movie, so here we go. We start off with the protagonist Caleb winning some lottery at his tech company job in California somewhere. He gets airlifted by helicopter to what looks like a secluded supervillain estate. Then, as he enters, we're introduced to what the director has even admitted in interviews is a dated idea, using key cards when it makes a lot more sense, considering we find out how tight the security at this place is, to use biometrics or facial recognition, which the terminal uses to identify Caleb in the first place. I mean, it's great the director admits it's a contrivance which is used to force the plot, but it's still a contrivance. Then we're introduced to our hybrid stereotype of the young supervillain combined with the tech startup genius. You know he's a young supervillain because he's an arrogant asshole who's rich, lives in a big secluded lair, and works out. But he's also a tech genius, so I'm gonna call him Fake Zuckerberg. Even though his fictional company in the movie is more like Google, Zuckerberg in the Facebook movie is young, arrogant, and brilliant, so it fits. This movie makes the amateur mistake of making him out to be a kind of asshole right off the bat, which decreases the impact of later reveals of him being even more of an asshole. Granted, there is one reveal of him being on Caleb's side, but this is still not the best choice here. So, fake Zuckerberg finally tells Caleb what's going on, that he's going to participate in a Turing test. Then fake Zuckerberg says, if the test is passed, you are dead center of the greatest scientific event in the history of man. But then Caleb says, if you've created a conscious machine, it's not the history of man, that's the history of gods. Hollywood, we need to talk. If you're gonna bring out the G word, you can't fuck it up like this, so stop doing it wrong. If he would have said history of man, you might have created a god. That'd be a lot more okay. Problem is, nothing in the rest of the movie gives this any context whatsoever either, so it's still a total liability. Please resist the urge to give me a reason to think you're not as smart as you think you are. So we're introduced to the AI Ava. She looks like a robot woman with her parts showing, and she seems to give good, sentient answers to the Turing test-like questions. As fake Zuckerberg says in the next scene, the reason for her parts showing is that passing a Turing test is easy. If you can't see them, it's not as hard. The harder test is to show that she's a machine, and she could still get Caleb to think she has consciousness. Not a bad line or rationale. But then, we finally get the first sign of trouble with the core of the movie. Caleb starts talking about how Ava's responses seem to be non-deterministic, and he seems to be trying to figure out the structure of how an AI would pick words and sentences. This seems to agitate fake Zuckerberg a little, so he says he won't explain how she works. He doesn't want to give a seminar to Caleb, he just wants to have a beer with him and a conversation. So when I first watched this movie, I didn't necessarily think anything of this line because at first glance, this doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it sets a precedent for their conversations. Caleb is the one who seems to be thinking about AI analytically, scientifically, i.e., the right way, and fake Zuckerberg doesn't want to do that, even though the movie implies he could. He wants to talk about them emotionally and get Caleb to talk about them emotionally. Because his next line is to ask Caleb how he feels about her. He says she's fucking amazing, and he says, dude, cheers. This is basically good thematic writing, because it's the writer trying to tell you, through the dialogue, what his overall story is about. He wants to turn it from a presumably analytical narrative into an emotional one. Considering how he goes about this, though, I think he's chosen to do it the wrong way. What I mean is, you can have an emotional machine narrative, but that aspect of it needs to be secondary or it misses the point. And he misses the point. 2 scenes later with fake Zuckerberg, we get him making a sex joke about the Japanese woman who brings Caleb breakfast in the morning, a nice foreshadowing of things to come. Also our first hint that this movie is going to be about sex. Caleb starts talking again about Eva's responses analytically and how he needs to try a different approach, and fake Zuckerberg yet again tells him to lay off it and start to worry about how she feels about Caleb. In the second session with Caleb and Ava, this is the direction it starts to go in. Ava starts asking Caleb about himself by repeating his own line back to him, though in this scene it's far more effective than the stupid line in Transcendence that does the same thing, because this one actually gives context to make it make sense. Although it's a minor detail at first glance, in some of the questions, Ava does ask Caleb if he's single. Then another question she asks is if he likes fake Zuckerberg, and we see the camera on the ceiling, a subtle hint that it's an important question. The power gets cut and Ava tells Caleb not to trust fake Zuckerberg. The power comes back on and they pretend they had a different conversation. Again, this scene has less dramatic impact because fake Zuckerberg already has been a bit of a shifty asshole up until now. In the next scene, we see fake Zuckerberg straight up being an asshole to the Japanese woman who seems to be acting as a kind of maid to just reinforce the fact that he's an asshole even more. He says she doesn't understand any English. Even still, she never actually says anything at all, which already makes me suspicious. Fake Zuckerberg also has a throwaway line about the power outages and how they can't be fixed by the same people, Caleb asks, because he had them all killed because his facility is so classified. This is just a cheap way to get us to dislike him even more, and it's completely unrealistic. Even if they installed the electrical components, that doesn't mean they got to see anything classified if that wasn't even brought in yet. Fake Zuckerberg asks about what happened during the power cut, and Caleb does a shit job of lying and says they did nothing. In the next big scene, fake Zuckerberg talks about how he got his AI to learn how to recognize facial expressions, and he says he did the same thing Batman does in The Dark Knight and spied on everyone's cell phones to get the data. Yet again, I'm too smart for this movie. There actually was a voluntary project to get this kind of image archive for an AI to learn how to recognize objects recently, and it worked. The AI can now identify objects in pictures. Give the TED Talk video a watch if you'd like. I highly recommend it. There will be an annotation and a link in the description, of course. Since it's so recent, I'll excuse the writer for not knowing about it specifically, but yet again, it's a transparent attempt to get the audience to think Caleb is a douchebag, by having him admit to doing something stupider and eviler than he reasonably would do when fake Zuckerberg could do what people in the real world did and ask for this stuff voluntarily. Especially since he's the head of fake Google. Fake Zuckerberg then talks about how he learned how to program in AIs from his fake Google, and he describes human behavior as impulsive and chaotic. Yeah, no. If you know anything about neuroscience or even psychology as a whole, this simply isn't true. We're very predictable and deterministic. Any chaos that we can be described as having is indistinguishable from mathematical chaos. In other words, we expect not to know things purely because of our accuracy of measure and the failures of our models to take into account all the variables. Arguments against this always come down to arguments from ignorance. Again, this is another sign the writer doesn't quite seem to grasp AI as well as he could. To be fair though, in the scheme of the movie, this doesn't seem to matter much. Our next scene with Ava shows that she has, shall we say, a bit of a feminine predisposition because she puts on some clothes, conservative clothes that is. She says she'd like to go on a date with him and asks if he's attracted to her, and lets him know that according to his micro expressions, she thinks he is. Then she says she likes him watching her on the cameras when he's not in the room with her. He gets uncomfortable, as he should. Then with the wordless shots later, we find out, with Caleb watching her through a camera, he is attracted to her. He's a robosexual. Great. Yeah, then we have the conversation where the movie officially breaks for me. Caleb asks fake Zuckerberg why he gave Ava sexuality, with cuts away to Kyoko while he says it, the silent Japanese woman, hint hint. Caleb correctly says sexuality exists as an evolutionary reproductive need. Well, he's right for the most part. As I've mentioned in an earlier video, sexuality allows for faster mixing of genes, which leads to a more diverse selection pool for natural selection compared to asexuality. It's not a need so much as an evolutionary advantage. But still, Caleb has the correct side of this conversation because fake Zuckerberg tries to argue consciousness can't exist without it, or that it's basically the same as being a social species, which is total bullshit. There's no reason we can't suppose an asexual species couldn't evolve to have consciousness. Then again, in case you're confused about what the movie's trying to push here, fake Zuckerberg then says, I know what you really mean is that you want to fuck her, and you can. I gave her a vagina, and that when stimulated gives her pleasure. You gotta be shitting me. There are more problems with this that are even obvious, including the fact that fake Zuckerberg is a hypocrite. For starters, if you want to truly make a new consciousness and you believe it has to exist with some kind of sexual dimension, which is wrong, then you wouldn't be so afraid of letting the program evolve itself instead of shackling it to a body that inherently makes it the sex and gender you've picked for it. Caleb then asks if it's just a diversion and if she was made to flirt with him. Fake Zuckerberg gives a long answer that boils down to he made her a heterosexual woman and she genuinely likes him. He gives another chaos argument in the middle of this too. Turns out, of course, Caleb is right and fake Zuckerberg is lying and wrong. This is a trend. It's likely intentional on the writer's part, of course, which complicates my feelings toward this movie, though, because this scene in particular is the movie arguing something that isn't true. In the next Ava scene, Caleb gives an analogy meant to argue that feelings make humans more human than knowledge alone. Ava reveals that she's the one cutting the power to talk without them being observed by fake Zuckerberg, to which Caleb correctly mentions he could still be watching and they don't know. He's right again, but of course we don't know that yet. Caleb then confronts fake Zuckerberg that he was selected on purpose because he asked the right questions and that the lottery was a ruse. He's right, of course, but they'll reveal later it goes deeper. Caleb watches fake Zuckerberg be a dick to Ava on a monitor by destroying her picture because obvious villain is obvious. Caleb then tries to confront Kyoko as she tries to undress, hint hint audience. The scene turns into fake Zuckerberg dodging questions though by dancing with her. Then, in the next Ava scene, she confronts Caleb with the realization that if she fails the Turing test, she'll be turned off, which shouldn't be right. And then she asks Caleb if he wants to be with her. Caleb then has a scene with fake Zuckerberg where fake Zuckerberg implies that Ava will basically be scrapped and there will probably be another model. Thankfully, though, fake Zuckerberg puts this in context by saying that AIs will view humans as primitive apes destined for extinction, to which Caleb responds by quoting Oppenheimer about the atomic bomb, I am become death, destroyer of worlds. Yeah, no, sorry movie. Fake Zuckerberg is right on this one. Humans kill other humans all the time too. The question is what's gained and what's lost. Fake Zuckerberg later becomes drunk and passes out. Caleb steals his keycard and we see him use fake Zuckerberg's terminal to review old footage. Big shocker guys, fake Zuckerberg mistreats his AIs and made them naked women at first. And Kyoko's one of them. I'm not saying it's completely obvious, though there are good hints, including the times that the camera is on Kyoko while certain dialogue is being said, and then there's what fake Zuckerberg says about AI's sex and the first sex joke he has. It's just that, again, if he wasn't already such an asshole consistently, this would have more dramatic impact. And remember, if they didn't use the contrivance of the keycard, we wouldn't have this stuff happening. So then we have the Blade Runner inspired scene. After the revelations, Caleb becomes worried maybe he's not a human either. So he starts cutting himself to find out, and of course he bleeds. Caleb then confronts Ava during a power outage and says he'll free her by taking fake Zuckerberg's keycard after getting him drunk and changing the security protocols. He tries to get fake Zuckerberg drunk the next day, but he doesn't have any of that. Also, minor note, fake Zuckerberg is written to believe in BS about diet for some reason. Fake Zuckerberg then confronts Caleb with the possibility that Ava is lying to him to help her escape and says that he's really on Caleb's side. Fake Zuckerberg then reveals he has footage from all the times the power supposedly went out. He acted like a dick and helped orchestrate the whole test to get Caleb to fall in love with Ava enough to want to try and get her out of the facility. He explains the test was to see if Ava would manipulate Caleb correctly to try and get out, and she passed. But then Caleb reveals he already reprogrammed the doors. Ava gets out, kills fake Zuckerberg, traps Caleb in a room, changes her body to look completely human, and walks out the door. Now you see how quickly I said that? The movie takes like 15, 25 minutes to do that. But that's the rest of the movie. So, before that whole last section of the movie happened, where fake Zuckerberg told Caleb, basically, I orchestrated the whole thing, I was talking to SolePorpoise. Totally recommend his videos on YouTube, by the way. So I said to him while watching the movie, the best possible way this movie can end is if this exact thing happens. That the whole thing is revealed to be a test for Caleb, and Ava still outsmarts everybody and gets out. So it's good that this happened, but again, that's given that the first 3/4 of the movie happened the way it did, which I don't think was done well enough. So ultimately the AI wins, the human characters lose because they're stupid and or assholes. The AI acted correctly to manipulate both of them. Hey, I'll take it. That's good. There's nothing wrong with any of that. Problem is, of course, it was contrived that fake Zuckerberg was that stupid. Not just to say the stupid dialogue he did, but that it was even possible for Caleb to reprogram anything at all for Ava to escape. But the biggest problem is what this movie seems to be trying to argue about sexuality, which is just bullshit. Does the end mean it goes back on all of that? I'm not so sure, and I don't think the writer is either, and that's the problem. If he ultimately was trying to say that what fake Zuckerberg said was wrong, he wouldn't have wasted all of our time. Take Blade Runner. Decker's job early on is to test a female android of sorts to see if she really is one. It's heavily implied he has feelings for her, but the movie never gets derailed by this. It sticks to its guns. In Ex Machina's own words, most of the drama of the movie, Caleb beginning to like Ava, is a misdirection, and that's the problem. The majority of the movie's drama itself is a misdirection from the substance. While I'm at it, there's an anime that essentially does this much better without getting off track. It's called Time of Eve or Eve no Jakan. It's only 6 episodes long, and it's free to stream on Crunchyroll, so go watch it. I've mentioned it before in a comment, but I think it's appropriate to bring it up here. If Isaac Asimov were alive today, he'd probably write something like it. It's a story that's laser-focused on the implications of his laws for machines, which the story adopts, while still being an emotional story of humans coming to terms with machines being just like them, having feelings like them, and learning how the laws might not be right for them. By comparison, Ex Machina is confused with what it's trying to say, and incorrect when it comes to the aspects of consciousness. It's simultaneously trying to say they can have feelings, but they could be a total ruse. It's saying that they're unstoppable, but that also it's probably because humans are incredibly stupid. It's sad that an independent film, written by a smart guy with total creative freedom, still can't manage to reach the same level as a movie over 3 decades old. But of course, on the other hand, at least it's not Transcendence, and it's still miles better than a Terminator movie. Thanks for watching.